Jindera is a small town in the southwest slopes section of the Riverina region of New South Wales, Australia. The town is situated in the Greater Hume Shire local government area, 15 kilometres north of the regional centre of Albury. At the 2016 census, Jindera had a population of 2,222 residents. German settlers had been coming into the Albury area since the 1850s, when the region was becoming known for its good agricultural lands. In the 1860s, many local names travelled from South Australia to settle in the area north of the Murray River. Such a group who had made the long journey from South Australia rested here at the 4 Mile Creek. The women and children remaining here while the men folk went to find suitable land for selection. The site provided a good supply of running water, and they had brought with them food and stock. The few German families already settled in the area provided much support and friendship. Within a short time a church and a school were erected, and the basis for the township of Jindera was established. The pioneer cairn on this site was erected to honour the achievements of the early settlers, and was constructed by Mr. Clary Hamdorf, a descendant of one of these families. It was dedicated in 1968 as part of the Jindera centenary celebrations. The Forest Hotel was built in 1870 and was first occupied by Mr. and Mrs. Carl Otto Muller. By 1874, the new proprietor was Mr. John Barlow, who advertised, "Mr. Barlow, the proprietor has much pleasure in informing residents of Jindera and parties travelling to Burrumbuttock, Piney Range, Walbundry, Walla Walla, the Lower Billabong and Urana, that he has completed his new 2-story brick hotel and has filled up and furnished with a view to the convenience and comfort of those who may favour him with a call. Cellar stocked well and stable accommodation complete in every respect." The hotel changed hands in 1876 when Mr. Joe Matthews, an Albury bricklayer, took over the business while Barlow operated a general store, but by 1878 John Barlow was again listed as the proprietor. On May 20, 1885, the paper reported the sudden death last week of Mr. John Barlow, very old respected resident of Jindera, well known for many years as landlord of the Forest Hotel. A widower for some years, he had the day before married for a second time. The hotel was still operational in 1908 when the then proprietor Mr. Ted Yee began renovations. The Forest Hotel lost its license in March 1919 and the premises sold to Mr. P. C. Wagner. The site is now home to the local shopping centre. The two Lutheran churches. Bethelchen Church. At the time of the German migration to the area there were two Lutheran churches. One group led by Gottlieb Klemke from Walla Walla formed the Bethlehem Congregation of the United Evangelical Lutheran Church of Australia, UELCA. The other group settled in Jindera were from the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Australia, ELCA, and established the St. John's Congress. Each group eventually had its own church, pastor and cemetery. It is believed they also had their own schools initially. Later St. John's School was built and all the Lutheran children attended there. Amalgamation of the two churches to form the Lutheran Church of Australia occurred in 1960 and both congregations came together to worship in this new church. The original St. Paul's was the first church to be built within the town area. English and Scottish settlers had been in the region soon after the area, then known as Dietz Forest, had been noticed in 1824. The original building had a thatched roof with slab timber and mud walls. The slab building was demolished in 1890 and the present St. Paul's Church of England was erected in its place and the new building dedicated on March 13, 1891. Over the next century issues with the building foundations had caused severe cracking in the walls of the church and in 1992 a group of volunteers under the guidance of architect Ken Young and stoneworker Alec Winnett completed works to put footings under the building and construct a new rock fence. Services continue to be held in St. Paul's with the minister coming from the North Albury parish. John Herman Rosler was born in 1825 in Prussia and arrived in Adelaide in 1854. He came to Jindera in 1874 where he established a general store in partnership with Peter Christian Wagner. Peter Christian Wagner was born in Germany in 1841, also arriving in Jindera around 1874. The bricks for the building were made at P.C. Wagner's property, Glenholme, on Gelbert Road. The partnership dissolved in 1884 and P.C. Wagner continued running the Jindera General Store and J.H. Rosler took up 2 acres of Henty Township land setting up another successful store. By 1906 substantial additions were required and further 40,000 bricks were made at Glenholme with the balance acquired from Albury. A Mr. Thorne was the architect with Leo Frauenfelder the builder and with the help of a Mr. Tozer, completed the full-width cedar counters and shelving as well as pressed steel ceilings. The large cellar below the store was excavated by Harry Woods and John Kieran, using pick and shovel, wheelbarrows and horses and drays. The new Wagner's store opened in April 1907 with a splendid display of new stock. P.C. Wagner retired in 1914 and passed away in 1927. His son Gustav, Gus, Frederick Wagner carried on until his death in 1950. The building passed through several owners and the house area rented out. The freehold was finally purchased in 1967 by a syndicate of local citizens to establish a folk museum. The Jindera Pioneer Museum was officially opened on 5 October 1968. The War Memorial, located on the corner of the park site, was unveiled on 24 May 1917. It was designed and erected by Mr. T. Molly, a monumental mason from Albury. It is in the style of the broken column, which represents the broken lives of the soldiers lost at war. It was the first monument to be erected in the district to commemorate the service of local citizens in WW1 and subsequent conflicts. An Anzac Day service is held at the monument each year. In the early days, sports days were Butch Schmidt organized by the hotel keepers and held Jindera cycle track on a nearby enclosed paddock. A race course was also set out near the Adelaide Hotel. An allocation of land was set aside for a school in 1874 and an additional 28 acres adjacent to the school had been granted as a school paddock. The teacher at the time found this too large an area to care for, and as a result in December 1893, the 28 acres was gazetted as a recreafy or reserve, owned by the Lands Board, and trustees elected were Messrs. John Kieran, William A. Neal, Gustav Burdick, and Eli Cross. Fencing was erected and grazing rights were given for a cost of 3 shillings and 3 pence per acre to keep the grass down. A 200-yard dam was excavated in 1896 after scrub was cleared from the site. A shelter shed was erected in 1901 at a cost of £11 10 shillings, giving the various sporting teams a place to change, and this was soon followed by turnstiles, a cycle track, tennis courts, a football oval, Australian rules, and cricket pitch. The turnstiles are now located at the Jindera Pioneer Museum. In 1902 the newspapers reported, "Our park is to be further beautified by clearing 16 acres and by forming a lake in the swamp section. This will make a nice promenade for visitors to the village. A number of farmers have promised to assist with plows, drays and scoops, and one of our leading citizens has promised a case of beer to refresh the workers." The following week the newspaper report read Mr. P.C. Wagner and his team plowed up the swamp in the park, and several farmers with drays, horses, scoops and shovels set about to scoop out a lake and piled the earth in the center to form a mound. The lake is still there, west of the large dam, and was used to water the oval before the town water supply was available. It now forms part of the Jindera Wetlands project. When the golf club was first formed, 9 holes were laid out in this park area.
Dirty, it'd be a lot to clean up.
Lovely.
This might be a suburb of Waterloo.
A newspaper of the time reported that Jindera had a football team as early as 1886, although the club was officially formed on June 2, 1900 at a meeting in the Jindera Hotel. Jack Kieran was elected as chair, Mr. C. Pagantscher as secretary. The club colours were selected as red, white and blue. In 1920, these colours were changed to red and blue, but they returned to the originals in 1955. The first competition the club contested was the Swain Trophy Football Association. Mr. J. Swain of the Jindera Hotel donating the winner's trophy. The club's first premiership year was recorded as 1916 when they defeated Bowner at Walla Walla. In 1933 the Central Hume Football League was formed, but Jindera withdrew as the travelling was too great. Together with Jerodgery, Lavington and Border United, Jindera formed the Hume League. The Central League disbanded in 1935 and several teams from this association joined the Hume League. No competition was carried out during the war years 1941 to 44. Jindera is the only original club member of the association. The club celebrated its 50th year in 1986.
Back.
you should take some probiotics to clean the gut out sometime.
Oh,
And get by them drinks, Greg.
walk it off.
The establishment of a Jindera bush fire brigade was prompted by the Great New Year's Day fire of 1905. That fire began west of Corowa. It devastated the local area and claimed 3 lives. It burned through to Tabletop before rain began to fall on the morning of January 3. A public meeting in January 1907 at the School of Arts was attended by 30 farmers, but few townsfolk. Chairman Mr. J.F. Shooter stated the object was to start a fire brigade. Mr. Palmer, who had convened the meeting, said it surprised him no organization had been formed and proposed a pump be obtained to remain in town. Horses and men could always be found, but the people of Jindera were so poor they could not afford the outfit without the assistance of the farmers. Mr. Laidlaw outlined how the Victorian brigades operated with a membership fee levied on landholders. A committee was formed of Messrs. Wagner, Wiener and Palmer to purchase necessary equipment, and in March 1907 a tender for a fire tank cart was awarded to local blacksmith Mr. J. Welsall for the sum of £22. A 2-horse-drawn lorry was procured, horses were borrowed from the butcher's cart, and the 200-gallon square tank and hand pump served the town for many years. The tank and pump were eventually mounted to a platform which enabled the outfit to be loaded to a motorized truck. In 1952 a 4x4 Ford Blitz truck was bought equipped with 3 Furphy tanks and a Grascos fighting unit. In 1965 the unit was remodeled and a second 4x4 Ford Army ambulance was purchased and rebuilt. In 1964 a fire siren was installed on the north wall of Krause's store. The 1979-80 season saw the brigade attending a larger number of fires than usual. Over the years, with better equipment and cooperation with other towns and regions, the brigade reached the point where they travel statewide and interstate to assist with firefighting. In the later half of the 1800s, tennis was fast gaining popularity across the country as a social sport that could be enjoyed by both men and women. While many of the larger district properties built courts for family and guests, enthusiasm for the game grew with the formation of tennis clubs and associations. Commencing in 1897, the Jindera Club listed 30 foundation members and a starting capital of £5, 6 shillings and 6 pence. Many churches also ran sporting clubs, and St. John's Lutheran Church drafted rules for a tennis club in 1925, with courts built behind the new school on the corner of Adam and Jindera Streets. On May 5, 1927, the Hume Tennis Association was formed to include clubs from Jindera, Jerodgery, Ivanhoe, Glenellyn and St. John's. Local matches continued both here and at St. John's until new courts were built on this site, and both clubs combined in 1970. The present complex was opened in 1977 and is now able to host large district competitions. Dressmaker's Cottage. The migration of German settlers from South Australia into the good farming lands of the region created a rapid growth in the township and business opportunities. By the 1890s, the community had become large enough to support its own dressmaker's business. At the time, work as milliners or dressmakers was one of the few acceptable ways for women to earn a living. Needlework skills being seen as natural and appropriate for the middle classes. Bertha and Alice Young operated their dressmaking business from a little cottage on this corner. The cottage was later dismantled, but the dome-topped cistern that served as their water supply remains. This building was constructed in 1872 for Michael Reinhardt Malkenton, who became the village blacksmith and wheelwright. Originally, the building had a roof of bark slabs held down with straight thin tree trunks as depicted in this early photograph. The walls were corrugated iron and the doors and upper gables made of timber. There was a cottage where the brick home was later constructed. As the area was heavily forested, a sawmill was also on site. This site hosted the one-bed maternity hospital operated by Mrs. Louisa Caroline Haberecht between 1895 and 1897. Louisa had trained as a nurse with a Dr. Covington of Gawler, South Australia, and she did obstetrics training with Dr. Cleaver Woods of Albury. As the midwife for the Jindera district, Nurse Haberecht delivered 32 babies in the modest hospital. Louisa was first married to Michael Reinhardt Malkenton, the original Jindera blacksmith, who was killed in 1885. While the first community meetings had been held in local hotels in February 1893, a public meeting was called to consider instituting a local school of arts. The old bakery was initially rented from P.C. Wagner for £10 per annum, and the committee later purchased the premises for £150. In August 1898, the Albury Banner reported, "A move is afoot to build a new school of art."
Like driving around. Did you get that guy?
Mm-hmm.
When they're driving around. Jindera.
This mural is reproduced from an original artwork by Jindera resident Marion Van Dawson and depicts the trek from South Australia to Jindera by pioneers in 1868. The mural was installed during 150th anniversary celebration which took place in September, 2018. The original oil painting was gifted to the community by Marion and hangs in the Jindera hub.
Like driving around. Did you get that guy?
Mm-hmm.
When they're driving around. Jindera.
Frederick Walter Krauss was son of a second-generation Jindera farmer born in 1904 on the family property on Malkinton Road known as Lilyfield. He married Frieda in 1929 and they lived with their 3 children on this site. Fred was a photographer and in 1933 built a small studio next to his home. Fred also began dealing in groceries and in 1961 took over as Jindera postmaster. In Fred's spare time he made cement bricks and laid the foundations for the building presently on this site. After several years of construction the building was officially opened on Saturday 12 May 1956 as Jindera General Store and Post Office. In July 1956, Mr. Kraus purchased the business of the P.C. Wagner General Store and after transferring stock and carried on the general store business in his building. His son, Ray, worked with him in the store and in 1971 became the Jindera postmaster. A separate post office was established on the northern end of the building in 1984. The grocery side of the business was sold and Ray continued with the post office business. Ray died in 2002 and the new owners established the post office on the southern end of the building. Frederick Walter Kraus died the 30th of August 2003, 7 months short of his 100th birthday. The first post office was opened as Dietz Forest Post Office on January 1, 1870. The first postmaster was Frederick Baker, who received a salary of £12 per annum plus a small commission on the sale of postage stamps. The post office was moved on August 1, 1875, but it retained the name of Dietz Forest until June 1, 1885. John Barlow, who ran the Forest Hotel, became the postmaster and conducted a store from a location across the road. Mrs. Elizabeth Haberecht took over the post office in 1886, which was then located in Wagner's store. Mr. R. G. Sawyer succeeded her on April 7, 1902, when the post office was located on this site. The office was transferred to Miss Ellen Gibbons on June 5 that same year and she conducted the business until 1951. Mr. G. A. Gibbons continued as postmaster until 1961 when the position became vacant. Mr. Fred W. Kraus acquired the business and operated the post office in conjunction with his general store from yet another location down the street. Mr. Ray Kraus became postmaster in 1971 and by 1984, the volume of business had increased, necessitating a separation from the general store. The present post office is located in part of what remains of the general store building. In the newsprint of 25 April 1874, there is need for a police station, if only for the purpose of checking larrikin nuisance in the area. Up to now pranks have been minor misdeeds, but are now getting worse. The stable of Mr. August Kraus was entered and horses disturbed and tails cut. Later, a headstone of a recent burial was smashed. During these early days the area was policed from garoggery. Horse stealing became prevalent in the area and it was decided that a station was required at Jindera. In March 1890 the first sod was turned by Mr. Ted Pye of the Forest Hotel. He stated that as the ground was hard, all hands must come to have a drink. Mr. Pye also laid the foundation stone and the last bricks on the chimney tops. The keys were handed to the local officer Constable Costello. In July 1896 and a choice assortment of trees and shrubs were presented to beautify the grounds. Originally, there was a matching wooden building at the back of the house block which was the actual station in later years. It was demolished when the station was decommissioned, and the house sold as a private dwelling. From the newspaper of 19 October 1900, Constable J. W. Glenn, the new guardian of the law, has given Teamsters to understand he will not allow them to pass through the main street during church services on Sundays. Quite right too, the Sabbath should be observed, although Jindera is still called a bush town. During WW1 Constable Palmer was in charge and folk of German heritage was supposed to come to report to the police officer each day. Palmer, knowing this was a time-wasting exercise for the farmers, would saddle up his own horse and ride around the district each day. He would wave or speak to the farmers and they would wave back. He would then tick their name off his list. The government of the time believed all German immigrants needed to be checked each day to ensure they were not involved in any sedition. After the war the farmers presented Palmer with a silver inkstand for his desk to thank him for not wasting their time. This can now be seen in the Jindera Pioneer Museum. The police station was closed in 1942 when the patrol was transferred to Albury. The station is now a private residence.